Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Sweet Home. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Okay, so first and foremost, I've only read a tiny bit of the Sweet Home webtoon. In fact, I'd say it's like a dozen plus chapters, so maybe like 17 or 18 at the very least. But, so don't expect too much drawing comparison from me, but just in this episode alone, it's really interesting. Just for one, we got that in media res opening, which I thought was so interesting. First and foremost, it's also set in September. I'm curious why they decided to change the dates. Maybe there's a particular reason for that, and maybe that comes up later on, because the webtoon is set in October, at least the beginning. I don't know how much time changes, but obviously we go from August, September. It starts in September, but when we rewind to August when Hyun moves into the apartment building. So I thought that was interesting. I'm assuming that's Hyun. I didn't pay too much attention. I couldn't really tell. His hair looks a little different, so I can't tell if that was supposed to be Hyun. I don't know if he's kind of like in his main protagonist bag of, oh yeah, like there's something different about me and I'm kind of a special case, or maybe not. I don't know. Because that looked like that was supposed to... I was like, because that looks like that's the apartment building just smashed up. Like I said, I've not read that far into the series, so we're probably starting pretty far into where the series goes, and then start, rewind to find out where it all started. What I thought was so interesting, too, is because if you read the manhwa, you learn about Hyun's circumstances. Obviously, I won't get into it until the show covers it, but Hyun's circumstances are I guess because that'd be too much, set up maybe for the television show, so just for pacing, maybe they'll circle back to it later, because there's so much setup that it's really interesting how they handled it. But like I said, because a lot of the beginning, at least in the intro chapter, I guess to be told, it's only the prologue. It's what covers that, and then immediately the first chapter begins, where we begin with Hyun moving in, almost getting sliced up by that mower or weed whacker from the security guard. And it's also interesting too, while watching this, because I don't always have that direct compare and contrast. It's so interesting because it's so fresh in my mind. It's so interesting to see how much dialogue is straight from the webtoon. To be fair, I've kind of noticed that a little bit more, obviously with The Last of Us most recently. How much stuff... Well, it's fresh in my head, but I know some stuff is straight out of the video game. So it's just interesting. I'm sure it happens a lot more, especially in adaptations, like a manga or manhwa or an anime getting adapted into live action. So it's just so interesting, just because I have this frame of reference a lot clearer in my mind. So it's just really interesting. The whole him trying to kill himself pretty early. I think he had thought about it, but he never actually attempted it in the webtoon. But obviously this will probably get covered in his past, but I know based on the webtoon, he has attempted it before. So it isn't like this is the first time or whatever. But when he met that girl dancing on the roof, I was like, obviously this is way different than in the webtoon. But then I also was like, wait, who is she supposed to be? And I was like, wait, she's not supposed to be who? And then she pulls out some cigarettes. I'm like, wait, she's not Home Dude's the little sister. I was like, whoa. Because that character in the webtoon is super small. Height-wise. So I don't know if she just is way younger in the manhwa than she is in the live action, because you couldn't cast someone that young. Or was it just a situation of maybe she is older than she appears, and it's just kind of that manga / anime / manhwa thing of just oh yeah, she just looks short for her age. But either way, even her interaction with the because I don't, in the webtoon, at least where I was, at this point in the story, those two characters never interacted, which I think is so interesting. Because she's telling him, oh, if you're going to, kill yourself, do it somewhere else, because you doing it here will inconvenience so many people. It's Jesus, that's so rough. It's not oh my God, don't do it. Because he didn't think she noticed what he was doing, but I guess maybe enough people come up there to do it. Or she was noticing it, but she was so in her ballet thing that she was kind of yeah, I'm more focused on what I'm doing than you trying to hurt yourself. It feels like that's the implication there. But yeah, even her interaction with the as they call him, the mobster / gangster, even her interaction with him is a little different, because they've also kind of played him a lot more like, because obviously he has a little bit of a sillier side. I mean, once again, I think that's that live action translation where it's like you're trying not to make your characters like, your character's supposed to be serious, so you lean into like the stoicness. You try not to make them too wacky because then it becomes too cartoonish, and you're trying to keep it as grounded and realistic as possible, I think, with the acting. So you try to like rein in the cartoonishness. So like, because he's a little sillier in the, once again, just a little bit I've read, like his interaction with the little girl was like, oh, like, wait, you come up here to smoke? Here you are chastising me, blaming me, saying, oh, maybe the security guard locked it because of cigarette butts that were left. But he's like, I never smoke up here, so it couldn't have been me. But it turned out to potentially be her because she came up there to smoke as well. So for their interaction to be like slightly altered in the way it was interesting. But even some scenes being like a 1-for-1, there's the bassist. I think her name is Yoon Shi-soo. That might be her. That might be the same character. I don't know. Like, I know her as the bass player because I don't really know her name enough in the Manhwa, because I think even where I was in the Manhwa, we never heard her. Maybe we did, because I know that interaction with the lady who had lost her baby, as well as the religious guy being like, oh yeah, I'm a Korean language teacher. Like, that whole thing is beat for beat from the Manhwa. And even the whole thing, because I thought she was being legitimate, like being sincere in the Manhwa when she was like, oh yeah, no, my hands smell like smoke. But then like she like puts her hand in her pocket and then comes up with the line like, are you germophobic or something? Or are you worried because he's kind of a weirdo or what? I mean, maybe she was being sincere, but in this case, like, because she put her hand in her pocket, made me go like, it just seems like she might just be germophobic to some extent. I don't know. Didn't come up from what I've read so far. I don't know, it's something about her seems like she would be a lot more outgoing than she is, because she does seem like she has that like very nice and bubbly personality, but then you see that she's very awkward, and especially when the guy's trying to talk to her, and it's just kind of like let me get out of here as fast as I can. I don't know if because he's even trying to be like, hey, I'm not a missionary or anything like that. It's almost like I got to tell you, I'm not trying to like religion you to death by like trying to like convert you, whatever. I'm not trying to do that. It seemed like he was trying to justify that, but like, oh yeah, I have the Bible and I'm going to church and I teach on Sundays too. But it's like it's not like that. I'm not trying to like convert you religious wise or stuff like that. But she was just so awkward about it. She's like, I got to get out of here, and tried to get out of the elevator as fast as she could. We also had the Hyun situation of him deciding like, okay, my suicide day is going to be the 25th because he got invited. He got the golden ticket to that movie, like a remake of something that he wants to see. So he's got that to look forward to. So it's like, cool, that's on the 25th. So after I do that, after I go see that, boom, 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 I'm going to, unalive myself. What I thought was interesting too, because there's certain... I should also circle back a little bit. That situation with the bass player, her and that woman and the guy in the elevator. What's so interesting is, once again, like the pacing of it all. Like that obviously manhwa wise, that's a couple chapters in that they rewind to show you that was kind of her early reaction, because her leaving the building for whatever she was leaving for, timeline wise, it's supposed to be when Hyun shows up for the building, but they kind of cut that, and it's like, no, that scene happens after he's already here, even though in like the manhwa it happens simultaneously. So I think some of these storylines that we're going to get in the manhwa, they probably like are probably moving them up, whereas in the manhwa it's like, okay, we see them a little bit later on, and then we kind of rewind to show you like this introduction to these characters. Like that was her introduction, was kind of rewinding to show like she left the building just as Hyun showed up to move in. So I thought that was such an interesting touch. Because the reason why I'm also bringing it up is because we got that scene with the security guard and that lady that gave him the fishes. I don't know if that's supposed to be implying something else with that woman, or whether, because I did not read that, so that could have been something that was later that was pushed up, or what. Because I was like, are we going to get more of the security guard? But then we only got like that was the only extra bit we got with him. And then the next time you see him is with Hyun, where he's outside his house. But I think it's already starting to kick in, because he was at least somewhat normal in the webtoon, if I remember, when he was giving Hyun like that drink and checking in on him. And because it was actually Hyun that had the smallest interaction with the actress that lives next door to him. A lot of that beat for beat played out. She's like, oh, like I'm not going to be a prostitute mom, or oh, why is my nose bleeding? Like a lot of that stayed the same, but it was like Hyun was staring outside of his, like he had the door open and he was looking out his apartment and she glanced at him. That's their only interaction. So they kind of gave it to the security guard because he's outside Hyun's door acting weird. So I'm like, were you already kind of like going through it at the time? Like in the manhwa, you weren't, because it seems like it's still happening all off screen again. But I was wondering if we were going to get a little bit more with him or even see it happen on screen. But him like outside of Hyun's door looking like that, because he knocks on Hyun's door and Hyun opens up, and that's how they have him and the security guard had their interaction. And even when Hyun like was like, hey dude, back away from me, I'm gonna go in my house, and then he like grabs the door and kind of keeps it open, I'm like, oh, you must be already slipping down that road. That wasn't the case before. I thought that was so interesting. But even the actress scene playing out the same too, with her being so like being monstrous. They actually made it even more brutal because they show you the cat's severed head and her grabbing it, because in the manhwa it's just the cat's collar, a whole bunch of blood, but you only see the collar. I don't think you see her grab the cat's head. So that was interesting. And her just like doing that creepy thing of like, it's so disarming. I guess when you're still in that middle stage, you're able to revert back enough to being a regular human to disguise yourself. I don't know if it's, what this series kind of reminds me of? Like, it kind of reminds me of, is it Gantz or Gantz? Gantz. If you ever like read that series, I've only read like a bit of the manga years and years ago. I think there's an anime adaptation, but I've never seen it. But either way, like, it kind of reminds me of that, with just like the horror and monster elements of it, especially the monster designs. Definitely give me Gantz. I think it's Gantz, but maybe it's Gantz. I don't remember how I used to pronounce it. I think I used to pronounce it Gantz. I don't remember what it was, but the monster designs kind of remind me of that, like horrific and just so weird. And then like they look kind of, some just look weird, some look normalish, and then they go full blown weirdo. Because we got it somewhat at the end of the episode, but because her design for what we saw of it was just like her humanish and just contorted and like disfigured. Like she still relatively looked enough like humanoidish, whereas the others maintain humanoid form, but they look completely monstrous. So that's why I'm like, she must still be in that transitional phase, because I mean, obviously it was only like maybe a couple, maybe even the next day when Hyun had that whole interaction with her and she was a monster. But yeah, she hears the bass player upstairs banging on her door. Luckily, the gangster runs into Hyun, who, because he's so freaked out, passes out. And so I don't know if Hyun went back on his own. Like I said, this might be something they cover in episode 2, but he doesn't get back in his room on his own. The gangster goes and checks on the bass player, and they notice, like, right, the girl wasn't just banging on your door, she was literally ramming it down. He punches the door for demonstration of, like, see, that's my handprint, like, that's just me punching it full force. Like, look how dented your door is. It's wild. So all that's happening, and then we have the situation downstairs. I even love that the guy who was opening the gate, I love for whatever reason they just gave the character a toupee. Like, he's just balding right there. He doesn't have, like, a toupee or whatever. Not unless that was something maybe that was just kind of an extra detail they wanted to add in, but because his hair was a little off, and home dude with the glasses, Eon Hyuk. I'm going to be struggling with these names, as you know. Like, I'm terrible specifically with Korean names. I think extra terrible. But also, like, some of these characters' names haven't been introduced in the episode, and if they were, they're like one time. So I have to try, and especially because their names aren't used that often. From what I've gotten in the comic, the only person I know's name pretty well is Hyun's, just because his comes up the most. But what I also thought was so interesting is the introduction of the firefighter. I'm like, ooh, you definitely aren't a character I'm familiar with. So I'm curious, because it seems they're doing the amalgamation thing, which is so interesting considering she's amalgamating a character that already exists. So the whole running through it really quickly, the whole situation of the creature, like the gate opening, the creature killing that poor dude, getting literal life sucked out of him, and Eon Hyuk like pushing it back with the fire extinguisher and them closing the gate on it. Now, what was so interesting is the firefighter was introduced, because she even said something I thought was odd. She was like, did you notice anything weird Young Hyuk's like, what are you talking about? And she's almost like, never mind. So I'm like, did she must have, because she was like, did you just come from upstairs? He was like, yeah. She's like, did you see anything weird? He's like, no, because the elevators were out, so he took the stairs. So it might be because she's from a different floor than him, so as we can see, it's affecting like the higher floors, well, at least in the building, because like everyone else must have been on like lower floors and never came across some of the other stuff because it must have happened on the higher floors. So maybe that's what she was saying, like, oh, I saw some weird stuff and all, but like it didn't seem like it was monster thing or whatever. It just seemed like maybe she saw some blood or maybe some people acting weird. But yeah, she's the one that ends up pushing the creature out. In the webtoon, it's the gangster dude. He's down there, and Yeon Hyuk's sister is downstairs with him. She's staying because they seem like they have a relatively good relationship in the webtoon. So I wonder, did that get turned a little bit for this, or is it really like that? But maybe I've only read enough to see them have a decent enough relationship. Maybe it's actually kind of bad, even in the manhwa. I just hadn't gotten to that point yet, or something. But that's what I thought was so interesting. It was like, interesting. So either she's like a brand new character made specifically for the live action, or she's a character that exists that comes up a little bit later on in the story, and they're just moving her forward. Because like because especially when they were like, oh, she's a firefighter, I was like, really interesting. And like I said, like the character of the gangster exists. He's just upstairs. So why is she filling that role? Like maybe she is like an amalgamation. I mean, because that happens from some time to time where like characters will pop up. Either a character that's created specifically to be an amalgamation of other people, or it's an already pre-existing character that represents other characters that might not exist in adaptation. I've come across those from time to time. The one that always sticks out to me is like Deadman Wonderland. The character Yu, he play in the anime. He plays certain roles, to my recollection, that are played by another character in the manga. That's just one of those examples I can think of off the top of my head. It's always the one that when I found that out, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Even though Yu is a character in the manga, there's just another character that was not in the anime at all. I mean, there's quite a few characters that weren't in the anime at all, but there's one in particular that Yu kind of filled that same role along with playing his own role in the anime. Once again, it's just interesting. So I'm curious if she's in the same boat. Once again, these are just thoughts I've had, having only watched one episode, probably watch the next episode, and it completely, well, it really won't answer that necessarily, considering like I haven't read much of the webtoon, because obviously story beat wise I've read past where this is right now. There are some story beats after this that I've gotten to, but like I said, I'm not that far into it, so that might be stuff covered at least episode 2 and 3, or maybe just 2. These are hour-long episodes. So did that thing only kill one person in the manhwa, in the webtoon? I think they did. I think it only killed that one person, because I think everyone else downstairs ended up surviving. What's also interesting too is like the firefighter, she got injured. I was like, because how this thing works isn't necessarily an effect. Well, even where I'm at, we still don't know how it works. I don't know if that's something that's ever really explained. Like, we know some of the process for it with the monsters, well, the monsterization as they kind of put it, but there's kind of a key factor we see in this episode for at least 2 characters. I think there's only 2 characters that have the nosebleed, because what I thought was interesting, because Hyun's nosebleed doesn't happen until he gets back in his room, because what happens is like he's facing with the gangster and his nose starts bleeding and then he passes out. So for his nosebleed to only happen when he gets in his room, which also the way they're depicting that is wild. Like, I don't think it's that severe in the webtoon, but they make that super gushy in this. Like, there's a lot of, I mean, maybe it is just that good, but I feel like it's not that bad. Like how like super bloody. I mean, it will continuously bleed, sure, but I don't remember it being like a waterfall like it is. What I also thought was kind of pretty neat is they actually give you a decent look at the monsters outside. All you see at this point in the webtoon was just silhouettes. You saw their shadows. You didn't actually get a good look at their like designs, and we got, maybe it's because you'll get obviously a lot more acquainted with them as it goes on. So maybe it's one of those things of why wait for you to encounter them? Let's move some of those up so you get to kind of see and just depict how these things are, because we haven't really gotten too much into the whole monsters and them talking thing. We hear it a little bit because one of them says protein, but usually they're not like, they're kind of like one word things, kind of like starving. It's that's as basic, that's as much as it gets. That's why like the actress is still in that middle process, because she was still having full on sentence, like even though she wasn't talking a lot, she was still having at least full thoughts, where it's only like with those creatures it's usually maybe 2-3 words at a time so far, not unless that changes. So I'm curious about who locked the doors, whether that was the security guard or what. Once again, I'm not being facetious about that. I actually don't even know the answer to that from where I was at. So it's like, you would assume, like, who else would block that? Well, because he does seem like he has a boss, because the guy came up to him when he got those fish. And, well, it was before he got the fish. The guy was like, yo, you got to take your bed out of here. Like, that's why you're sleeping on the job. It's because you have your bed there. And he's like, oh, how is someone supposed to rest? It's like, that's the point, you don't. I guess he's kind of maybe like the landlord of the building. That dude. Maybe he's the one that did that. But all the switches are there in, like, the security guard's office. So did he switch all those? I mean, maybe when he was transforming, which he kind of was already in the process when he went to see Hyun, maybe he locked it all down just to kind of keep all the food inside to himself, type of thing. Because even I don't know. Well, there is a creature I'm familiar with that will probably most likely pop up in episode 2. Maybe he's that creature. Because there's also a dude that dies on the outside that we didn't get to see that scene. So either that's just kind of like cut, or it's going to happen in the next episode where you're going. We saw one lady running outside. Like, there's still enough alive people out there that were running and got killed by the monsters outside. So I thought it was interesting too how they implemented that, where they were kind of introducing that concept earlier on while Hyun was playing the game. There was someone in the chat being like, yo, is my nose bleeding a lot? Should I be going to the hospital? Some of that came up a little bit after the monster stuff started popping off. So we haven't gotten the national response yet. I guess that did pop up after Hyun woke up in his room, so maybe some of that will be covered next episode. But we see it's like a full-blown apocalypse. It's interesting because it's kind of got that Walking Dead aspect of it. If you're unfamiliar with the Walking Dead, our like traditional who is traditionally our main protagonist. Not as much in the show because that mantle kind of moves the needle. It's kind of an ensemble cast, but it's Rick. Rick was asleep and then woke up and the zombie apocalypse happened. Hyun's kind of in that same way. Granted, it already kind of popped off. It's just worse after he wakes up. So, but it looks like very apocalyptic. The buildings are on fire. Things look crazy. And like I said, it ends on his nosebleed. So like I said, this is maybe episode 2. Maybe episode 3 will probably be as far as my knowledge goes. So beyond that, it's just going to be like free reign. So we'll see what happens in the next episodes, and maybe I'll give a little bit more compare and contrast if curious, if you're about some of the differences and how they're handling stuff. And like I said, maybe next episode it might even lean into Hyun's backstory. Can we get a little bit of it this episode? Which makes me wonder, did all that stuff on the phone actually happen where he got all those messages? Because that's tied in, because it's like, oh, like, even one of the messages talks about his parents being dead. That's part of his past. But I was like, oh, interesting. Now, was that all real is the big question. We'll ultimately have to wait to see how that all plays out. I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.